Hi, Stu Stover again. We are continuing our macroeconomics series, and what I wanted to get to today is really important. Really important because this whole notion of trade and understanding trade has just got very convoluted in American society for a variety of reasons. So we've kind of lost the theory, we've kind of lost some history, we've kind of lost the understanding of how the trade system actually functions. Not to say there aren't some problems with our trade system, which we'll get into later, but to get into this idea, we got to go back to David Ricardo. So David Ricardo was the economist who followed Adam Smith. And so he wasn't attacking Adam Smith in any way, shape, or form, I don't think anyway. He was actually adding to the theory, because Adam Smith didn't actually do all that much with trade. He said free trade was good, but he didn't get into it. He was interested in other ideas as more important, at least in the early stages of the switch to a free market system. David Ricardo was the one who came along and talked about how we make trade work. And so his premise was free trade. So what is he arguing? He's arguing that societies, in most cases, benefit from free trade. Okay, so how do we do that? So number one, what he talked about is Great Britain produced a surplus of wheat back in that era. Well, what's the reason that Britain is so good at producing wheat? The climate, the soil, the skills of the people. So let's put those up here. Climate, soil, skills, and just in general, we're talking about the system is set up to deliver lots of wheat. All right, so they produce more wheat than they can consume. So what should they do with that surplus that they have? Well, they should trade that to Portugal. Portugal, because of climate, so all these things, they were ill-equipped to produce lots of wheat. All the reasons why that was the case. But what was Portugal good at? Wine. Is Great Britain well suited to producing wine? No, the climate is terrible. The soil is not suitable for, and you didn't have a skill set of workers who could do that stuff, So what you did is Ricardo is saying, you take the surplus wheat, you trade it to Portugal for their wine. Who wins and who loses? And the answer is, according to Ricardo, both countries win. Both countries have more than they had to start with. Their wealth has gone up. So if you go back to Adam Smith, his notion is the wealth of nations. The wealth of nation isn't in the land. The wealth of the nation is in the people and the skill sets and the value added that, I'm using current language, guys, apologize for that. But the value added that people are able to create and produce for that. And that boosts the wealth of the nation. Not only at an individual level, but at a GDP kind of level. So trade surpluses were absolutely critical. Creating wealth. He saw this as a great way to create wealth. So the terminology that David Ricardo used was something called comparative advantage and absolute advantage. Okay. Absolute advantage is kind of a squirrely notion. It's more theory than it is practical in many ways. But it basically said that a country is better able to produce everything than another country. Okay, which is different because comparative advantage says what should a country focus on? It should focus on the things that they're good at, they're better at than some other countries, and you create surpluses and lots of good things are supposed to happen. Absolute said, you're better at everything. So and I apologize, guys, the worst example I can come up with on is Haiti right now. Haiti in economic terms, is a failed society. The government doesn't work, the economy doesn't work. I mean, pick an issue, it doesn't work. We have, at least at the moment, I don't know when you're going to see this, but at the moment we have international peacekeepers in Haiti trying to create some level of stability. So what is it that Haiti produces that we want at the moment? Not much. What are we better able to produce? Cheaper, higher quality, the whole works, than Haiti can do pretty much everything. And so you could have some minor examples of absolute advantage one society has over another one. But comparative advantage says, well, what should we focus on? We could focus on the things that we're good at. So let me switch to the other one. And let me give you the example of the United States and El Salvador. Okay, why do I say El Salvador? Where do we get most of our tropical fruits from? Well, Latin America. El Salvador has been a big player in that. They have worked with Dole and Del Monte and others to provide bananas and pineapples and all the other stuff that we like for tropical fruits. And so why is El Salvador so good at that? Well, we go back over to this side. It's climate, soil, skills, system. They are good at producing bananas. So bananas. You and I can walk into the local grocery store and we can buy a pound of bananas for 59 cents. You gotta be kidding me. They're gonna grow those things in Central America, ship them, box them up, put them on a ship, send them to Miami or New Orleans, and then get shipped to Michigan, and we can still buy them for 59 cents a pound? You gotta be kidding me. What an astonishing system that is. And so El Salvador is really good at tropical fruits. Okay. So let's follow the train of thought that we seem to be having in America at the moment. I mean, it'll probably change tomorrow, who knows. But the theory is that we shouldn't be sending our hard-earned dollars, okay, in the language of the stuff we've been talking about, we shouldn't be sending our hard-earned gold to El Salvador to buy bananas. We should grow them ourselves if we want them. What's the minor problem with growing bananas in Michigan? Do we have the climate for bananas? No. Bananas require roughly 12 hours of sunlight a day. What do we have in Michigan? In the summer we're 16 hours a day, in the winter we're 8 hours, I don't know. And so our climate, where we're located in the world, doesn't lend itself to us growing bananas. Well, do we have the correct soil? We don't have tropical soil here that is suitable for bananas. Do we have a whole bunch of people in Michigan who are skilled at growing bananas, at the agriculture and the system of bananas? And the answer is no, we don't. And our system is obviously not set up for bananas. Theirs is. So if we did it in Michigan, we decided to be, quote, self-sufficient in tropical fruits in Michigan, what would it take? It would take us having hothouse greenhouses, controlled environments, which means how expensive would those bananas be? You could be looking at $10 a pound. Is that a good use of our resources? Isn't that a waste of what we would call efficient use of resources if we spent all that money to grow bananas in Michigan, and frankly they would become a luxury item? How many would we need? Probably not very many. So what we do is we buy those tropical fruits from El Salvador in the traditional scenario. And there's a few other things that El Salvador provides to the world community. So you look at, say, Honduras. Honduras for a while was one of the places where if you're making cheap clothing, you went there, because if you're a manufacturer, the laws are relatively loose and you can pay people next to nothing, and child labor and all the other things. And so we encourage manufacturers to go to these low-cost places to do low-cost, low-skill work. Do we want to do low-cost, low-skill work in America? Excuse me? Why would we want to do that? Why don't we focus more on the high-skill, high-wage part of the economy in America? So they're doing tropical fruits. In the old days, we'd also had people, because did they have a surplus of people? Sure. And so they would come to America and they would fill the kinds of jobs that you and I didn't want to do. So the hard, physical, low-wage kinds of work were typically done by people coming from someplace else. Historically, what happens to those folks? Their kids get an education, they start to move to better jobs, and now what do we got? We now need more people to do those low-skill jobs. So what is America good at? So interestingly enough, there's a number of categories that we are really good at. Historically, we are really good at airplanes. Okay, so we make really good airplanes, both commercial and military grade. And so does El Salvador need planes periodically? Yeah. The minor problem for El Salvador is how many bananas do you have to sell to buy a plane? It's a difficult equation to sort out, but they need airplanes periodically too, which also suggests, does El Salvador simply want to stay as a producer of raw materials, in this case tropical fruits? Probably not. There's probably a lot of other things they may want to do. So airplanes is critical for our American economy as we sell to the rest of the world. A second one is technology. And we have been, for a whole host of reasons, a real player in all levels of technology for the rest of the world. So whether that's Google, whether that's Facebook or Meta, or whether that's Microsoft, pick a company, we have gone around the world. So if you go to the Middle East today and you open up a computer, what are you going to find for an operating system? It's going to be a Microsoft operating system, most likely. And so we have done a remarkable job with our technology exporting that around the world. Phenomenal kinds of value added to our American system with that one. And airplanes are not number one. I apologize, I shouldn't have put that number one. Typically food is one of the number one things we export to the rest of the world. We are astonishingly efficient at producing food, far more so than almost any other country in the world. So whether that's dairy, whether that's wheat, corn, soybeans, pick a product. And so we're going to export this stuff to El Salvador. Now, El Salvador doesn't want to stay there. Is this static? Does this stay the same generation to generation? No, there's always movement in terms of what things show up on our list of what we export to the rest of the world. And let me point out, some of the high-paying jobs in America are in our import-export business. So if we kill that because we want to do tariffs or we want to preserve America first, whatever language we're using at the moment on this stuff, there tends to be some real negative consequences to that. Sometimes, you take the pain and, hopefully tomorrow is a bright, new, wonderful day, or maybe not. So the dilemmas here is we need to understand that tariffs may well muck up this system in very unfortunate ways. So what was David Ricardo saying? Is that a healthy economy that is trying to create wealth has their friends that they work with, and you're going to trade the kinds of things that they're good at with the kinds of things that we're good at. Now that drives public policies in all sorts of ways. So what should we be focusing on? Okay, so again, I'm giving you sort of a snapshot of what's going on in America today, but our agriculture community in today, because it's early 2025, they're really worried that with all the tariffs and the tariff wars that may be showing up, the trade wars, whatever you want to call them, that in fact what's going to happen is a lot of countries on the world are going to stop buying American goods. And if you're in the agriculture sector, what happens to the price of your whatever you're producing if the international markets dry up? It's really, really consequential stuff. So are we going to then subsidize even more the agricultural sector? You know, you get into all sorts of screwy stuff with this stuff. So you could make this chart, US, what we provide for the rest of the world, against, you could pick any country you want. Because well, you could do Canada, you could do Mexico, you could do Chile, you could be the Europeans, you could do Japan, you could do all sorts of stuff in terms of understanding this. So if we think about this question of what should we do with trade, why does it matter? It matters because, and we'll do this in a later session, but gross domestic product. Okay, that's how we measure. GDP is measured with a formula called C plus I plus G plus or minus imports, exports. Okay, so what does that mean? Our American economy, we're a consumer society, so 70 to 80% of GDP is based on your spending and my spending. So what drives the GDP? Yeah, it's us. But then I is called business investment. So it's the business community building more factories, hiring more workers, innovating new technology, you know, whatever they're doing. The I part, the G, is government spending. And here's the kicker on this one, and why this matters, is we Americans, we import a lot more than we export. And so it's always a reasonable question to talk about the nature of, is one country taking advantage of us? Are there things that we should do to deal with that country? And to be fair, I mean, I think tariffs are typically a bad idea. But there are times that tariffs are appropriate, or other kinds of strategies to limit companies around the world selling too much in America. So the short answer is, this all makes sense. David Ricardo makes sense, but to some conservatives' credit, they're saying that this imbalance between what we import and what we export is out of balance, and we need to correct that to some degree. Now the problem is that, how do you correct it? Do you actually want to kick this back to 60 or 65%? You know, that the GDP is connected to us as consumers. You know, for a whole host of reasons. I mean, another way to do this, guys, and it's complicated economic stuff, but we could lower the value of the dollar. Okay, so think about what that means. You lower the value of the dollar, that means imports coming into the country cost more. Okay, what's the flip side? Exports going out of the country cost less for them to buy. And so there's a ton of different ways to do it. Now, one of the things we have seen historically, we'll talk more about this in later videos, but the Japanese, the Koreans, and lots of other countries have exported tons of stuff to America over my lifetime, actually 60s and beyond. But what they're doing is they're doing direct investment in the United States. So they're building a factory in Georgia or Ohio or someplace else to build these things locally as opposed to just shipping them to this country. So there are a ton of strategies we could do that are actually more positive strategies as opposed to just punitive strategies. So the basic premise here is let's create comparative advantage. Let's figure out how to do that wisely for America. What does that mean? It means we need to have a skilled labor force and a well-paid labor force if we're going to actually do this kind of stuff. We have a role in the world community economically, and so some of the, it feels like silly stuff we're going through right now politically doesn't make sense against the economic theory that shows up in most textbooks. We'll pick this up. The next one we do will probably be inflation. Thank you very much.